So today I'm going to be talking about Mencius, the Chinese philosopher which we've been discussing in class this week. So Mencius's key concepts that we're going to go over now are one, the cultivation of virtue, i.e. moral sprouts; two, the four virtues, benevolence, ritual propriety, filial piety, and wisdom; three, the extension of virtue outwards; and four, the notion that human nature is basically good. Okay, so the four virtues are sprouts. First, it's the idea that all virtues are cultivated like a plant. So this means that we're born with intrinsic abilities that are, like a young, youthful plant that can grow into a fully fledged virtue. And it takes many years to cultivate these sprouts and turn them into virtues. And so this is like an agricultural metaphor. You can think of farmers growing rice or berries or any other crop. They start with a small plant that eventually grows into something productive and useful. But it takes many years of careful cultivation, and it's very easy to mess it up. So in other words, it's very easy to mess up your moral development, much like it's easy for somebody to destroy their crops. Next, we have a list of virtues. Two on this slide, two on the next. So the first two virtues, the first virtue comes from the sprout of compassion. And the sprout of compassion is our intrinsic desire to do good for others or see others do better. And benevolence is our ability to actually realize this desire. And so that's why benevolence is the fully grown virtue that comes from the sprout of compassion. Next is the sprout of shame. And shame can grow into the virtue of dutifulness, or filial piety. You can think of shame as the emotional state that children have when they first realize that they've done something that embarrasses their parents, i.e., they feel ashamed by their actions. And this shame, even though shame gets a bad rap these days, sometimes we talk about shaming people as being something that is maybe socially harmful. For Mencius, shame is actually an important part of becoming a good person, because when we feel ashamed, then that leads us to correct our behavior. And the thing that is most shameful in ancient Chinese society was not fulfilling your obligations to listen to and respect your parents, elders, and political leaders. Therefore, shame leads to the virtue of filial piety as we mature. Next is the sprout of of courtesy and modesty, which becomes the virtue of ritual propriety. Ritual propriety is the virtue associated with carrying out our ritual functions. For instance, if you're a Christian, you go to church every Sunday. If you're Jewish, you go to synagogue every Saturday. And if you're Muslim, you go to the mosque every Friday. These actions are you fulfilling your ritual propriety, right? And so in ancient China, it was the ritual to honor the ancestors, or it was the ritual to honor the rain gods that sent people. And Mencius did not view these rituals as important because he believed in the gods, but instead thought that they were important, in fact, because they brought society together. Finally, there's the sprout of the sense of right and wrong, which grows into the virtue of wisdom. And this virtue consists of our ability to always know to do the right thing, even if it is against the rules. So an important example comes up in Mencius when one of his followers asks, okay, it's against the rules of ritual propriety to it is against the rules of ritual propriety to touch your sister-in-law because it is akin to adultery. And so Mencius's follower asks, well, what if my sister-in-law falls in a river? Can I reach into the river to save her? And Mencius says, of course you should. In fact, you'd be a barbarian not to. So even if it's against the rules to touch your sister-in-law, if it's to save her life, of course you should do it. Okay. And so it's important to note that then that our virtues are had from birth, at least in the form of sprouts. Because of this, all people are born with a basic capacity to do good. In fact, in a certain sense, we're all born good. Now, this doesn't mean that we're all good people when we grow up, of course, because a lot of people's moral sprouts are damaged. So, if you think of someone like Hitler or Osama bin Laden, we may see them as evil people, but Mencius would say that the reason that they're evil is because the intrinsic goodness that is in all of us was damaged or destroyed somehow when they were growing up. And because of that, they became adults that did evil things. Finally is this idea of extension of virtue outwards. And this is how Mencius thinks that our virtues, our sprouts grow into full virtues. So let's take the example of compassion and benevolence. So when we're born as a baby, of course, we may have the capacity for compassion, but we're certainly not really compassionate towards anyone because we don't really realize right away that other people exist. However, over time, we do become compassionate towards our parents. We want our parents to be happy. We feel sad when they're sad. Next, we become compassionate towards our siblings. And then later on, our friends, we can become compassionate towards them. Then members of our community. And hopefully, if we ever become political leaders, we develop first our compassion even further outwards, to the point that we really gain a full sense of benevolence. And this would be compassion towards all people. All of the citizens of our state, foreigners, maybe even animals. Anyways, thanks for listening, and I hope that you enjoyed the reading.